If you're on the fence about letting your child have their own device, be it an iPhone or an iPad or other smartphone, you're not alone. And the solution for a lot of parents is just to lend their children their devices. And while this may seem like a safer option, it can potentially end up causing huge problems. Ultimately, if your children have their own device, you've got full parental control over that device, as I discussed in my video where I explained exactly how to set up parental controls on your child's iPhone. Huge apology to Android users. I don't know how to use those, but I have got other videos that I have found that I will link below that will help you do the parental controls on Android if that's something you need to do. If your child has their own device, as long as it is totally set up with all those restrictions that we talked about in that video, then you know that only child appropriate content is going to get as far as that device. However, if they're using your phone, there are a lot of things they might come across that you don't necessarily want them to see. They'll have access to your private information. This could include banking, your social media, work emails. They can accidentally or intentionally read emails, maybe containing information about gifts you bought them or information about adult stuff they just don't need to know. They can end up leaving emails on read as opposed to unread, and then you don't end up dealing with them, which leads to other problems. Or they could end up sending random messages to your boss, or liking someone's picture from several years ago as if you're stalking them, posting personal information from your phone to your own social media accounts, which has happened to friends of mine before. With their own phone, they can only access their information and their apps, which you have pre-approved. If they've got their own device and you've fully set up the parental controls, they're going to have much safer online browsing. Chances are, as an adult, you're not going to have child-friendly restrictions on your internet, and it's possible they'll see content you're not comfortable with them seeing. It also reduces borrowing requests, the whole, can I borrow your phone? Can I borrow your phone? Can I borrow your phone? Ultimately, for me, I work online and a lot of my business is run from my phone. And even if you don't have a job like mine, chances are a lot of your work-related stuff is on your phone. If your child then is playing on your phone, they drop it, it's broken, you're going to be without a phone, this is going to impact your work, along with many, many other issues that it'll bring up. And if nothing else, your battery may just be flat and then you can't do things like get in touch with people for work or for other reasons, or use your phone in an emergency because it is flat. It also stops children downloading things because if you set up the parental controls properly, then they're not able to just download things without your permission. They'll have to send a request to you in order to purchase an app. However, again, I've known people in real life who have had massive bills from the iTunes store because their children have been playing games and then they've been like, get some more coins to level up and play the game. You know what they do, like the little add-ons, the in-app purchases. And obviously if they're using your device, it's an adult device, you're not going to have restrictions on paying for in-app purchases because it's your phone and you're an adult and you can make those choices. Whereas if your child is playing games on your phone, those restrictions won't necessarily exist. I just know so many people that have had massive bills. It also teaches them a little bit of responsibility. As discussed in that previous video, they'll have their own screen time limits. So you're not necessarily having to be that nag and be like, only this amount of time and then I'm going to have it back and negotiate with them. It's like, this is the screen time limit set up. You get this much time on this app and then it turns off. And after that, you can only use it for reading, audiobooks and educational or whatever else you've got it set up for. However, if you've handed them your phone, it's just another negotiation of who's having it, when you're having it back. And the responsibility is put all on you to monitor how long they're using it for, rather than just delegate that to the Apple screen time automation and be like, well, it's out of my hands. You've had that much screen time now it's going off. It also teaches them to take care of their own things, their own devices. Perhaps they're going to take care of something a little bit more if it is their own, and then if it is not charged or it's not taken care of, they won't have it, rather than if it's yours and it's your responsibility to take care of it and make sure it's charged. Now, equally, I do not buy my children brand new iPhones. My children have devices such as iPhones and iPads passed down through the family. This initially started with our eldest, who wanted an iPod. Remember when iPods were a thing? And iPods were great. He could just have music and videos on it initially, and then games on iPods, I think maybe came out later, maybe a lot later. We first started using this old device hand-me-down system when I was due for an iPhone upgrade and I had some trade-in price for my iPhone. But also his birthday was coming up and he wanted an iPod. The iPod we were looking at buying didn't have nearly as much storage as the device that I was going to trade in and sell. And the trade-in device wasn't going to get me nearly as much money back as I was going to have to pay out for this iPod, which didn't actually have as much storage on it. So it just didn't seem to make sense. So in effect, an iPhone without a SIM card on it is a very small iPad, or is the equivalent of an old iPod. And this is initially how the children's devices started. I did eventually put SIM cards in the children's iPhones purely because I thought it would be so irritating if we were in an emergency situation and their device was to hand and I needed to call 999 and it didn't physically have a SIM card in it, even though it had the ability to have a SIM card in it. So instead, they have SIM cards now in their iPhones. Obviously, our 13-year-old, by the time you see this video, I think, just turning 13, has a SIM card and uses it because he goes to secondary school and they do actually need to call him. But the girls don't really need SIM cards in theirs, and they definitely don't use them to phone anyone else because they have restrictions on who they're allowed to add to their contacts, and they're restricted to only being able to contact people who are in their contacts. So essentially they can contact me, my husband, each other, their auntie, and that's just about it. Bella has one little friend in dancing who I have pre-approved with her mum that they can speak to each other, and one other friend that she used to be in school with that she communicates with, sort of like a pen pal. But other than that, she doesn't use her device as a phone as such. It's used more like a very small iPad or an iPod. They don't use any form of social media. The things they use it for most will be taking photographs, looking at photographs, filming their own cutesy little videos, some colouring apps, reading books, listening to audiobooks on Audible, especially if they're struggling to fall asleep, and accessing homework that they're sent from school. So why do I hand them down? Well, first of all, it is a lot cheaper than buying new devices. And I'd rather the children learn the lessons on looking after a device with a handed down device than a brand new one straight out the box. They all have screen protectors on them and they all have cases on them because naked iPhones make me nervous and they're just too easy to damage. I do find that an iPhone-sized device is far more portable and much easier to take on a trip than something like a Switch, which is another sort of kid-friendly alternative for on-the-go entertainment. And also it's a lot more versatile because obviously if your children are using a Switch, they can't also use that to access homework or learn times tables on apps, things like that, which they often have to do as part of their homework. I love that I can set up the parental controls and I feel they're really user-friendly, easy to use. They keep me in the loop. I get reports every week on exactly how much time they're spending on each app. Equally, I can look at that information at any given time. I don't have to wait for the report and I can tweak how much screen time they are or are not allowed accordingly. And it's just really good to keep on top of this, but I love the system. I find it works really well. And it helps me keep my phone for me. Not that I really need to be on my phone all the time because I don't. But if we're on trips, I need to make sure my phone is charged because I'm using it to take lots of photographs, use it for maps, signing into airline tickets, all these things that would be a real pain if my phone was flat. Imagine you get to the gate, you're trying to get on the plane and no can do because it's flat because your child's been playing on it. That's really not helpful. So even though they are hand-me-down phones, I think it's really important to teach them to look after their own things. Obviously, it's less expensive if there are any breakages. And if one of their children's phones was smashed, yes, it would be a problem, but it would not be a huge problem. And like if they smashed my phone, there'd be elements of my job I just wouldn't be able to do until I got another phone. And quite frankly, the hand-me-down phones are perfectly adequate for the usage that the children have. Kids do not need the latest top-of-the-range iPhone in order to watch a little bit of Disney Plus, read a book, and listen to some music, which is what my children use their phones for. Plus, it's an eco-friendly choice because the phones are being recycled. And it's kinder to our wallets too than buying brand new iPhones. If you're thinking about passing down a phone to a child or you've been gifted one by a family member, there are a few things you need to do to make sure that it's set up properly. And the first thing you need to do is to wipe that phone completely to make sure there's no adult content or apps you don't want them using on it. The best thing you can do is wipe it entirely and start afresh. So to wipe the phone and to delete all personal data, you go to Settings, General, Transfer or Reset iPhone, and erase all content and settings. The person who previously owned the iPhone will need to put in their details in order to allow this, but then the phone can be totally wiped and it's like it's brand new. You need to set up the new Apple ID for your child and add them to family sharing. It is so important. I talked about that in the parental controls video, that your child has their own Apple ID so that you can monitor their settings and have parental control and make sure that they are staying safe and only accessing what you're happy with them accessing. You need to turn on screen time, activate Ask to Buy, and set up customized content filters. We'll talk about all of that in a second. Personally, for our family, and obviously you need to do what you feel is right for your family, but for our family, I felt it's been beneficial to pass down older devices and make sure that those are totally set up and they're age appropriate. The children are protected from things they shouldn't see. My social media, my work, my bank accounts are protected from little fingers pressing the wrong buttons. And everyone has their own devices with their own screen time allowances, because I personally believe what might be appropriate for adults won't necessarily be appropriate for children. So if you have an old phone gathering dust in a drawer, or you're offered one by a family member, rather than get the very small trade-in amount that you're likely to get in selling it on, it might be worth setting it up for your children as a child-safe device. Ultimately, whether to let your child have a smartphone and at what age is a really hot topic. And I discussed this in depth in the video that I did about the Swiped documentary on Channel 4, where we went over a lot of the dangers highlighted in that documentary and how we can protect our children from them. And if you want to make sure you've got full control of your child's phone and you're keeping them safe online, and you want to know exactly how to set up the Apple parental controls, click on that video on screen now, and I shall see you over there.